Hello fellow YouTubers, and welcome to episode 3, reading my first self-published novel, Aggravation. Yes, it's a different setup. I'm using my iPad, mainly because my other cameras have inbuilt overheating default, and they cut out after about 10 or 12 minutes, which is really a tad aggravating. So I decided to give the iPad a try. And as will be the procedure, I will read a small final section of the previous episode, and then start anew. How do you like the background, eh? Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. But it is a shed. Anyhow, without further ado, I'll start again. Used to belong to two old sisters, Harriet and Henrietta MacArthur. Reckon they were descendants of John MacArthur. But I don't know about that. A little eccentric, the sisters were. Anyhow, they both died within a couple of months of each other. Earlier in the year, in the house and everything in it got left to the Salvos, according to the local newspaper. Must have thought all their Christmases come at once to get something like that. And for a little while, they couldn't make up their minds whether to sell or keep it. Maybe the rumours going around that it's ordered put the willies up them. Who knows? Don't believe in that sort of stuff myself, but I guess some do. And what with all this paranormal bullshit going around these days. Lived for near on 70 years I have, and I ain't seen anything strange other than my next door neighbour with her hair in rollers wearing a mud pack. My grandfather fought in the First World War, and he told me once about the angels he and his mates had seen when they were doing battle at Mons, France. Said it was the weirdest thing he had ever experienced. Said he couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing. Thought he must have been hallucinating until his mates told him they were seeing the same thing. Strangest thing of all, he had said, was the eerie quiet that came on all of a sudden. One minute the battle was raging, and the next there was nothing but the sound of silence. Said he thought he must have been shot and killed, and when he noticed a strange white-blue mist and saw the angels, he was convinced that he must be dead and was in heaven. I didn't want to believe what he was telling me, but I had no choice. Not the sort of bloke to joke around about something like that. My grandfather wasn't. Some folk today would say it was one of those close encounters we've been hearing about for many a year, ever since that incident with Betty and Barney Hill 40 or 50 years ago. But I don't know about that. Know of it and others like it and then some. But I don't know, if you know what I mean. Hear so many conflicting things these days you don't know what to believe. Like it was and still is with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Magic bullet and grassy knoll and all of that stuff. Beats the shit out of me. Why they bother with all that conspiracy mumbo-jumbo? Poor bugger's been dead for a long, long time, and still they persist. Don't make sense to me. Clyde had been happy as he stood listening to the old man talk, although he couldn't help but wonder if he was a natural talkative individual, or had a wife who wouldn't let him get a word in edgeways, and now that he could, he did. Didn't matter. But once seated on the grass he had felt truly contented, a rare feeling the likes of which he hadn't felt for, well, he hadn't been able to remember how long ago. Usually he didn't like people rattling on, mainly because they didn't have anything to say that was worth listening to. But this man was different, and what he had to say and all of what he had said was interesting and worth the time to listen to. Even when he had said, "You don't talk much, do you?" Then had continued on before Clyde had had a chance to open his mouth. Clyde hadn't minded that at all. In fact, he had smiled. But nothing put him off his running commentary, whether he was baiting his hook, casting his line, reeling in another carp, landing the fish and immediately gutting it. You have to do that, otherwise they stink to high heaven, he had said, or washing his hands or rolling a smoke. Couldn't roll a smoke without washing my hands. Slime in those carp is putrid stuff. Far worse than anything they have inside of them. You want to remember that. My wife Alma, she don't like the flesh of carp. Reckon it ain't fit for human consumption. But what does she know? Eats those goddamn awful sheep brains. So what does she know? Never had a taste for offal myself. My mother Rose, she's dead now, was in the habit of serving up tripe and white sauce. When I was young I could never get used to it. I ate it. Had to, otherwise I'd go hungry. But I never liked it. My father Harold, he's dead now too. He didn't like tripe either. But he ate it just to keep peace in the household. Strange thing is, my mother wouldn't eat rabbit. Reckon she'd had enough of the damn things when she was little. Don't make sense to me, but there you are. Give me a feed of rabbit any time and I'm as happy as a pig in mud. Don't mind kangaroo now and then either, but don't like the smell of it cooking. 6 of one and half a dozen the other, don't you think? People eat game meat these days and think it's a culinary delight. But what do they know? People in the country have been eating game meat since Adam was a boy and think nothing of it. Nothing special about it, whole country's teeming with it. Be a different story if those folk in the city had to kill their own, but wrap it up in fancy packaging and put a price on it and they think it's the best thing since sliced bread. But what do they know? Know nothing about living in the country, those city folk. Know nothing at all. Think they do, but they don't. The closest thing they get to the country is watching a documentary or Farmer Wants a Wife. Still, we all have crosses to bear, don't we? City or country makes no difference. Mostly the same problems, only different geography. Live, work, die, all the same no matter where you live. Different lifestyles, but the same in the end. Rich or poor don't make any difference once you're dead. Only makes a difference to the ones left behind, that's all. Once I'm gone, I don't care what happens. My affairs are all in order and I can rest easy because of it. Wouldn't make any difference anyhow. Once you're gone for good. And there's no coming back no matter what your faith is and what you believe. Houdini couldn't come back. And if he couldn't do it, then nobody can. Wouldn't want to come back. Been here once and once is enough for me, I can tell you. With my luck I'd probably end up in the city. I was born, raised, worked and lived all my life in the country. But never once did I want to live in the city. Too many people for my liking. Been to Sydney a few times for a visit, but I'll be blowed how people put up with each other living so close as they do. Too much noise too, to my way of thinking. Goddamn noise never stops from one goddamn minute to the next. Enough noise and welcome these days, without going to the city. I can tell you. Used to be a time when Welcome was a really quiet town. Still is most of the time, except for those goddamn noisy thingamabobs some of the young people have in their cars these days. Feel like sticking a plug of gelignite in the tailpipe of their cars and blowing the lot to smithereens at times. I do. No consideration for others is what's wrong with those types. Don't give a hoot nor a holler about anyone else. Come down to the river here, they do. Friday and Saturday night, drinking and yahooing and playing that goddamn awful noise so loud it'd wake the dead, it would. You don't talk much. Police come along and move them along some of the time, but only because I rings them and make a complaint. Don't like complaining, but what else is a bloke supposed to do? Can't take the law in your own hands, can you? Would like to, but you can't. Something has to be done about it, otherwise it'll never stop. But what to do, I don't know. Community needs to pull together is the only way to get things done. Like we did with the credit union. Damn hell of a good idea that was. Was for it from the very beginning. Had me fill of those bloody banks, goddamn greedy lot they are. Never satisfied they are. Got to keep raking the money in as if there were no tomorrow. Pay the bosses of them banks millions a year. And for what? To sit on their backsides is all they're doing. Don't make sense to me. There was a time when the ordinary working folk wouldn't be able to earn $1 million in a dozen lifetimes. Now those lazy so-and-sos earn it in a couple of months and think nothing of it. Makes you wonder what they do with all that money. Not enough to do what that Microsoft bloke has been doing with his money, to be sure. But what's the point in having that much money unless you can do some good with it? Only so many houses and cars and such you can buy, and you can only live in one or drive one at a time, so what's the point? Money for the sake of money is all it is. 1 million is too much and 10 million isn't enough. Is it? Now that's a fish. That, my friend, is a yellow belly. £2 if it's an ounce, or my name ain't Sandy Harold Merriweather. Clyde Phillimore, you say? Pleased to know you, Clyde. Wife will eat this fish without so much as a second thought, she will. Damn fine fish. Bring you back again and again when you catch a fish like this, it will. Anyhow, that's enough for me for the day. Time to head on home and take care of these fellas and have a cup of tea and maybe a lie down. Oh, by the way, that house I was telling you about is being handled by Bob Lawrence. He owns the real estate office this end of Main Street if you're interested. Won't find a better house in the town to my way of thinking, but maybe you'll think different. I don't think so, but you never know. All in the eyes of the beholder is what it all comes down to, I guess. Clyde hadn't needed to consult his list to know the house wasn't on it. For if it had been, it would have been the first to get the once-over. Strange though, he had thought. If the house was as good as Sandy maintained, why wasn't it in the display window for all eyes to see? Who knows? Could be any number of reasons, Clyde had thought driving back to town. Although he hadn't been able to think of any. Not one. 10 minutes later it had all made perfect sense. Sort of. Sisters left the stipulation in their wills that if the Salvation Army decided to sell the house that it wasn't to be advertised. Bob Lawrence had said. A big man with a big paunch, bald head, deep voice, who reminded Clyde of Kojak without the lollipop. Firm in their belief that word would get around and the right person would come along sooner or later. They were right, of course, because I know the house will sell regardless, even if it is supposed to be haunted. Did he? And it doesn't bother you? No? Good. I don't believe in ghosts myself. Sisters did though. But then when it came to the sisters, the weird and the bizarre were commonplace. So I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. Had all kinds of beliefs. The supernatural, alien visitations, the paranormal, the occult, reincarnation, all sorts of silly stuff. Even believed there was a pyramid buried under Tor Hill in Welcome State Forest that had a beacon that attracted UFOs like a moth to a flame. Won't have a bar of that pyramid thing, but we do have our fair share of sightings in this area. Have done so for a long time. Bob Lawrence had continued to be a wealth of information during the short trip to the house, and while escorting him through the interior of the MacArthur house and the extensive grounds of the estate. The house had been locked up for some time and had a strong smell of lavender with a hint of something else that Clyde had been in two minds about and couldn't place. Bob had smelled it too and he couldn't put a finger on it either. Could be one of 100 different things, he had said. What with the sisters being hoarders as they were. Saved everything they did except for food scraps and the like. So I guess they knew where to draw the line. Not like some of them hoarders you see on television, who turn their places into rubbish tips. The local Salvation Army was somewhat overwhelmed by the bequest, but it took them a little while to come to terms with it all. And they only got around to making a decision what to do with the house a couple of weeks ago. And, as you can see, they haven't arranged to have the house cleared out as yet. Pretty understandable when you consider it took a week or so to take all the furniture and the like out of the house, and some of it was real fine furniture too. You know, expensive, antique-like. The garage is pretty much full too, as it is with the big shed in the backyard. Still, everything is in an ordered state, so to speak, and it's the same all over the place. I can contact the Salvation Army folk and tell them to pull their finger out and get rid of all the stuff if you decide to buy the house. Still, despite all the accumulation, the house has been well maintained and doesn't need so much as a nail hammered in or a screw tightened. And the grounds are as neat as a pin. Got a bore in the backyard too, and a good one it is at that. Mighty handy at times of drought, and the only reason the sisters were able to maintain their lawns over the years. There's two 25,000 litre water tanks as well, one each side toward the rear of the house, full to overflowing with the recent rains they are. Kitchen, bathroom, the master bedroom and the ensuite are the only rooms relatively free of clutter. And what there is, and little of it, is the sort of stuff you can use. Toilet paper and soap and those sort of things. Sisters had an ensuite added 10 or 12 years ago, I seem to recall, and a pretty penny. It must have cost them into the bargain. Even to match the original brick would have cost them an arm and a leg, aside from all the other work. Paid for the lot in cash money too. None of this putting things on tick and paying later when you did something for Harriet and Henrietta. Don't know where they got their money from, but they certainly weren't short of a quid. Local history states that their father, Charles, owned the town pharmacy and the sisters had worked for him, but neither married, so I can only assume that they inherited. Don't know why they never married, considering how attractive they both were, unless their mother, Victoria, kept the wolves from the door. She was an attractive woman too in her heyday, but the later years weren't kind on her at all. Maybe that's part of the reason why Harriet and Henrietta didn't like having their photographs taken, afraid they might look too much like their mother. Perhaps that's why there were no family photographs in the lounge and dining rooms either. None that I noticed anyway. Maybe the sisters packed up all the family photographs after their mother passed away, because there weren't any in the house when the Salvos picked up all the furniture. Not that they would have wanted the pictures, but people always buying the frames. The only piece of furniture the Salvo didn't take was the kitchen cabinet that occupies the west wall, but only because it was so big that it was impossible to remove without raising the roof or taking out a wall. And pulling it to pieces wasn't an option either, seeing that it was custom made, and doing so would have ruined it altogether. And as you can see, you have the best of both worlds with the slow combustion stove and the gas range. And the house is hooked up to town water supply. Welcome has never run out of water even in the driest of times. Spring fed the reservoir is. Never seen it any lower than half full, or half empty depending on which way you want to look at it. Plenty of firewood in the area too. You want to feed the fireplace in the lounge room. Delivered to your door if you want it that way, or you can get a permit to cut your own in the state forest. Feel free to ask me any questions, but other than what I've been telling you, I think I've got it pretty much covered. Clyde had liked the place the very moment Bob had brought his car to a stop in front of the house, and the ordered chaos inside hadn't bothered him in the least. In fact, the prospect of going through the lot had appealed to him. Excited at what he might discover lay hidden in the myriad of cardboard boxes and wooden crates and the piles of neatly tied newspapers and magazines. The asking price had been $440,000, a bargain by any stretch of the imagination, an amount Clyde would have gladly written a cheque for there and then. But he had made an offer nonetheless. $420,000. After all, it was to be expected, but also because he had decided to clear out the house and shed himself, and that had to be worth something, Salvation Army or not. Upon his return to Glebe, Clyde had wasted no time in arranging for his house to be auctioned, selling 3 weeks later at the Fall of the Hammer for $997,000. That, despite the agent's fee and subsequent legal cost, and combined with his savings, made Clyde a millionaire, despite the cost of the house in Welcome. He had had 60 days to vacate the house, but had timed it well, and was gone in half the time. That had all happened in April-May. Now it was November of 2010. And Clyde, like all the residents of Welcome, likes the name. He still thinks it's a funny name as in strange, but he likes the name nonetheless. But being a resident for 6 months doesn't make him a local. In order to be considered so, you must be either born in the town or a resident for at least 20 years. Such is the general consensus and psychology of the population. Not all, but most. But Clyde is okay with that. He doesn't mind it at all. When he walks the main street of Welcome, very few locals recognise him, and those that do rarely greet him with any more than a muffled hello or a nod of the head. Clyde likes that. He always reciprocates because it's the polite thing to do, but other than that, he is content to keep to himself. Perhaps the locals feel the same way. Holy smoke, I must be losing my mind. I'd finished the recording of the reading and realised I hadn't said thank you for watching, and until next time, bye for now. Used to belong to two old sisters, Harriet and You fucking bastard. Well, you know what just happened then? Apple sent up a little notification. I didn't know if it blocked the screen and what the hell was going on. And that's damn aggravating too. Anyhow.